Um, Before I pass over to Nicole, I'd like to give a brief overview of AD Instruments. At AD Instruments, we create industry-leading software and hardware tools for life science researchers and educators. For educators specifically, LT along with education kits is one of our extraordinary offerings. So what is LT? LT is our online learning platform with ready-to-use content for life sciences, nursing, medical, and veterinary courses. LT is used in over 250 institutions globally and comes with over 500 interactive and fully customizable lessons for active learning, whether you're teaching in the lab or remotely. So that's why today's session is amazing if you run labs or teach. Using our content, software, and hardware, there is improved efficiency, increased student engagement, improved results in theory and clinical practice, and increased student pass rates as well. Best part, as I said before, is that the platform is completely adaptable if you want to make your own content or edit the existing ones. So the key focus in today's webinar is anatomy teaching. And before I hand over, let me introduce you to ADI-built anatomy content. LT's Anatomy Collection is a complete curriculum of ready-to-use online anatomy lessons and labs, featuring media-rich dissection and histology images and videos. You can see the available topics on the screen right here. Moving on, let's finally meet our speaker. Today, our speaker is Nicole, who's lecturer in exercise physiology within the School of Medicine and Psychology at ANU, where she also oversees the undergraduate human anatomy course for Bachelor of Health Science program. She's responsible for designing and delivering innovative education materials across both the programs. So without further ado, over to you, Nicole.
Thank you, Deepika. Let me just get my screen shared here, and that will look quite familiar to most of the people online, but we'll dive in just a second. Thanks everybody for joining. I do just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which I live and work, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. As Deepika introduced, I currently oversee our undergraduate human anatomy program here at the ANU. Before getting too far into the actual way that we use the LT and integrate LT into our program, I just wanted to quickly, provide an agenda and a bit of an overview about what I'll go through with you today. So first, we'll just quickly introduce our human anatomy team here at the ANU. I'll then give you a bit of an overview of what our Bachelor of Health Sciences program is and what our aims are, followed by an overview of what our human anatomy course is. It's a little bit, in my opinion, non-traditional compared to other places that I've worked. So I'll just kind of run you through that, and that might provide you with an idea of the way we do, or the reasons that we do the things that we do in our course. Then we'll talk a little bit about what the human anatomy semester looks like, which is a broad overview, and then talk in more detail about how we integrate LT into the human anatomy course. And that includes in our weekly activities and different examinations that we have our students do, as well as in their one group assignment that they have to do as well. Finally, I'll just finish off with what some of the benefits and challenges that we've had with LT are, and some student feedback that we've been given throughout the time that I've been here at the ANU as well. So this is our core anatomy team. We have Associate Professor Alexandra Webb, Associate Professor Christina Volter, Dr. Riamka Agio-Bruce, and myself. Dr. Volter, Agio-Bruce, and myself all kind of teach into the undergraduate anatomy program, and Associate Professor Alexandra Webb primarily teaches into our medical school or our Doctor of Medicine and Surgery program. But we've all really come together and created content at different times, and we're constantly using this content as we develop and refine our human anatomy course every year. So I just wanted to acknowledge them because they have played a very large role in the production of some of this content as well. Just a little brief overview of our Bachelor of Health Science program. Really, it's a very broad focused program. We aim to prepare students for a future in medical, allied health, and health-related professions. A lot of our students that do come through the undergraduate program have a primary goal of getting into the medical program here at ANU or elsewhere, but not all do, of course. So we try to prepare them for other different allied health careers where possible as well. Now, our Med 3186, or our Human Anatomy course, in this course, students really develop a comprehensive understanding of the morphology and function of the human body, but also what happens when there might be disruption of normal structure and function that we have every day. I guess the main thing to point out here is that our anatomy course is offered kind of as a standalone course. It's not actually compulsory within our program, but we do have a lot of interest from students taking this course, and it's very competitive to get into because we don't have a lot of openings. We can't have a lot of labs because the labs are in demand for our medical program as well. So it's not from other universities where I've been, there's usually an anatomy followed by a physiology course, and that's not exactly how it's run here. Students are required to take physiology, and then they have the option to take anatomy later on if they want, or if they're competitive to get into it. Anyways, we use in this course a combination of activities for students to learn from, and that includes lectures, online multimedia resources, tutorials, and practical sessions. And we have 3 specific assessments or assessment items that are used in the course. We've got 3 practical exams throughout the course, a single group assignment, and a final exam that the students have to do as well that are actual assessable items. There are other activities that we provide them with that they're not assessed on throughout the course as well. So this is kind of a broad overview of what a semester in our course would look like. Essentially, in the first 4 weeks, we have our neuroanatomy section, followed by our musculoskeletal section, and then our body cavities and viscera section at the end. Throughout each week, we have students doing weekly activities, and these are largely integrated with the Kira Cloud platform. We also have our practical exams at the end of each block for neuroanatomy, musculoskeletal, and the body cavity and viscera sections. And then we have, again, as I mentioned before, a group assignment, which is an anatomy resource assignment. And all of these we kind of use the LT platform and we integrate it into the learning throughout the semester. So let's dive into how we do that a little bit. Students are automatically enrolled when they're admitted to our course. There's real, from my perspective, seamless enrollment that occurs. We are very lucky here at the ANU. I'm not sure about other universities, that we have a technology enhancement team that do help us if there's any glitches in the system that are required to be worked through. But we've also had contact with LT and the team at AD Instruments if needed as well. There's a lot of support there for us when required. The students are provided real direct access through their online management system. So we've created essentially a textbook for them to follow in the learning management system throughout the semester. And within that textbook, every week it outlines what they have to do. There are direct links for the LT platform that they can click on and take them to the weekly activities that they need to do throughout. So it kind of provides a really nice structured way for the students to understand the requirements of the course without having to go into the learning management system for something and then into the LT platform for something else. It's all integrated together quite nicely. So we use LT specifically for a few different things: our pre-practical activities, our practical class sessions, and our weekly online quizzes. And these are what we kind of consider our weekly activities that we're integrating LT into. We also use it for our practical exams, our final exam, and then for our video resource assignment, as I mentioned before. So when we integrate LT into weekly activities, we do this in a few different ways. We use it prior to and during our practical class. I've just highlighted a little asterisk here that I wanted to point out that we here at the ANU tend to make our lessons from scratch. But as Deepika mentioned before, there really is a nice library of pre-existing resources that are provided by LT that you can use in whatever manner that are needed. But I suppose it's kind of just legacy, and I was indoctrinated into the program where most of the content was being created from scratch, and so that's kind of what we've continued to do moving forward. But essentially, each week the students have that pre-prac activity, a practical activity, and a quiz following on from that. And just to give you an overview, the structure of our practical classes themselves, they're 2 hours long. The class is divided into 2 groups, and each group spends an hour in the medical science lab and an hour in the anatomy lab each week. We have a primary lecturer floating between the labs and then demonstrators from our medical school to help students work through activities if needed. So again, we're very, we have a lot of resources to help students in this space when required. But I will go into here how we kind of integrate LT into our pre-practical activity. As I mentioned, every week students can follow along in their book on their learning management system. And at some stage, they'll come across a link where we ask them to complete their pre-practical activity. I've pulled this out just as an example, and hopefully this link should work. Perfect. When the students click on the link, as I mentioned, it takes them directly to their LT learning system. And here is where they will complete the pre-practical activity for the week. So in this week, with students, we're learning about the upper limb. And so there's a pre-practical activity that's been developed that they go through. We love that the drag and drop options, there's a lot of different types of questions that you can ask students in these systems. And again, the content that's already available would have a lot of this stuff in its own right. So these are just activities of things that we've talked about in lecture already. They're there to reinforce students before they come into the laboratory, and we ask them to conduct these activities prior to coming into the laboratory. And then they submit that, but they have access to it throughout this semester, so it's not gone for good. So that's an example of how we integrate our pre-practical activity. Firstly, the next we have students do a practical activity, and prior to my arrival here at ANU, which was only a couple of years ago, students had kind of notes that were prepared that they had to print out and bring to class with them, and they had to fill out the notes as they went through their practical activity. I have since adapted this so that all of their learning is on the Kira classes or on the LT system, which I think, and from feedback that I've had from students, has been really beneficial. They love that they can just fill everything out while they're in the lab going through on their computer, and again, have access to that throughout the course. So this is an example of a practical activity, again, the same week 3, where they're learning about the upper limb. We provide their specific learning outcomes to them. And then as you can see here, we've structured it so that they have the activities all on a separate page for the medical science laboratory, and then the activities in the anatomy laboratory as well, separately in itself. And essentially, this is just the guide. So the students come in and they know they have to open up their practical activity activity in the Kira Cloud or in their LT system, and they can go through and they work in groups in their prac just to go through all of the activities that are available. Now, this looks quite boring, but to go along with what they have on the page here, we often have cutouts of things, you know, muscles that they might be taping on bones, or lots of different hands-on activities that they do while they're filling out these practical notes as well. And then following the practical activity, we always have a weekly quiz for the students to do, just to test their knowledge for that week and make sure that they've understood and come and ask us questions if there's things they don't understand. So again, they would click on a link that would take them directly to their LT platform, and they would conduct their quiz here. It's a mixture of multiple choice, short answer questions that we tend to ask, drag and drop as well. And yeah, these are more drag and drops that they can do too. So they'll fill out the quiz, and submit that every week. We don't use the quiz as an accessible item, but that's just for their feedback, and they're given feedback on that as well. So that's really kind of an overview of how we do our weekly, step-by-step kind of activities that students have to do in CuraCloud. That we really love that we have kind of the pre-prac activity, the actual practical activity, and then the quiz to follow up on. We think that gives students a really nice enriched way to follow along with the material, engage with the material, and make sure that they're comprehending and keeping up with the material as well. So then I'll just touch briefly on how we integrate LT into our examinations. This is our practical examinations specifically. So just as a brief overview, we have 3 prac exams that are done at the end of each of those sections that I mentioned earlier. These are all conducted in person, so we give every student a computer from the laboratory and ask them to sign into LT when they do the exams. They're given 15 minutes to complete the exam, and the exams are all multiple choice questions. And this really provides kind of a checkpoint for students at the end of each section to make sure that, they know where they're at with the material that they've learned, and if they're up to speed with anything, or if they need to study more on things as well. So this is an example of what one of our practical exams might look like. We give them really specific instructions. We also provide them a practical exam prior to, just so that they can read the instructions and know the format of the exam overall. And then they just go through and do the practical exam. CuraCloud makes it really easy. We set the time that students start the exam and the time that they finish the exam. And even students who I have who might be on an educational assistance program or anything like that, we can make sure that their actual LT platform is set up specifically so that they have the extra time that they might need and things like that might be required. So that makes it really nice and easy. I guess the other super benefit of doing it this way is the marking isn't too cumbersome, which is always a good thing. And then finally, we also integrate LT into our final examination. Our final exam is conducted again in person with all of our students. They have to sign into LT. They're given a computer from the lab. They're given 120 minutes to complete the exam, and the exam is typically a combination of multiple choice, R-type, annotation, short answer, and problem-solving questions. And really, our final exam covers all of the material taught throughout the semester, and we really try to integrate it so that students have to essentially synthesize and apply their knowledge in different ways to solve some more complex problems in this exam. So again, just as an example of how we integrate CuraCloud into this part of our teaching, we've given them specific instructions of how the final exam will look and what it consists of. And again, we give them a practice final exam so they understand and they can kind of time themselves going through what this exam might feel like in an actual exam setting. And then we've got our Part A, Part B, and Part C. And so that just has the different types of questions that we ask within them. So Part A is all real multiple choice. We then include some R-type questions where we ask the muscles, ask them to match muscles to their innervation or structure to their arterial supply, etc. And then we have what we call our mini case questions, where we provide them with a small case and then ask them to answer questions related to that case overall. And this is really where we try to integrate all of the different sections together. So this case might have some neuroanatomy, some musculoskeletal, and some body cavity and viscera anatomy all combined. We do that. We have several cases for them to fill out here. And then we do our problem solving, which really is just a much larger case to think through overall. And again, some different types of questions that they have to answer in this final exam as well. or in this problem solving section as well. And then I guess finally, the last thing that we use LT for is during our assignment peer review. So briefly, our video resource assignment, we require students to work in groups of 4 to 5, and they have to create an anatomical video resource that can be used or shared with their peers to help them understand and learn more about a different topic of anatomy. We provide some suggested topics to students, but they're able to pick a different one if they talk to us. We just try to avoid too many picking musculoskeletal topic and not a neuro topic or something like that. The students will submit a draft of their video, or sometimes it's just an outline at the mid-semester checkpoint, just for feedback and to make sure that all of the anatomy content is correct. We don't want them to produce the video and then we can't use it, or they can't disseminate it to their peers because the anatomy is wrong. And then they submit a final draft at the end of the semester. And part of the marking rubric, it's about 10%, they just have to provide a peer review on each other's videos. And this is where the LT platform really comes into play. What I like to do is upload all the videos to the LT platform. All the students can access them, and I create essentially a quiz for them to do, and they go through and they provide peer review on the video. It's pretty straightforward. I have an example here where this is a video that some of our students created last year. So it's been uploaded and they have to watch the video and then rate the following question. It's very subjective and it's only a very small percentage of their grade overall, but it provides us the ability to get student feedback on each other's video resource project that they've turned in. So I'll just click into this because, again, we provide them an instruction page. And then as you can see here, I've uploaded a video to every different page. And this just allows them to, like I said, go through. They can watch the video, decide, how to peer review it, and then move on to the next one, so on and so forth. So Kira Cloud, or the LT system, has just been really great to create additional kind of assignments or assessments that we need to have the students tap into if needed or when needed. Okay, and then I guess with that, I'll just dive into really what we as the anatomy team see as pros to the LT system, and then some challenges as well. The best thing that we really love and the students love as well is that they retain access to all of this material throughout the semester. It's kind of all organized in one space so that they can just go back to it as needed to kind of study from, or, whenever they need to revisit anything. The students also have direct access to it without having to, as I mentioned before, print off different practical notes or things like that. And they seem to really like that element of the system as well. Students find it easy to follow along as they go through the class. And I mentioned this, you can set date and time for the materials to be opened or committed if they are committed for grades. The actual system can communicate directly back to the learning management system for your grades also, so that's really handy as well. We as a team find that it's a very user-friendly platform, especially as we're creating a lot of our content, but even more so probably if you're using the content that's already available. There's the great resource library to use and integrate as you want to, as Deepika mentioned, and there's good support from the AD Instruments team too. I guess there's just a couple of challenges, probably mostly related to the fact that we are creating all of our own content. So, I created the practical activity for all of the pracs this year, but then I had to create a feedback one for them because we like them to see where they might not have gotten the answers completely right when they were working through that activity. So creating 2 lessons and then filling in, all the feedback was cumbersome in the beginning, but now it's done, so I don't have to think about it again, so that's fine. Another big challenge that we do have is with the annotation activities. There's some kind of a limitation, and this is probably something I need to talk to the team about. There's a limitation where the text for the annotation is really large, and so if you're trying to annotate a lot of things, there's just not enough room on the image to annotate where you need to. So that's a bit of a challenge. And we have had a couple of issues just with some of the automatic marking on exam questions, especially the R type and the drag and drop questions. I think the weightings are maybe a bit off every once in a while. So again, something I'm sure the team could probably help me with, but finding time as a time poor academic can be challenging sometimes. So I might need to follow up with them on that. And I'll just finish off here with some of the student feedback that we've had. This comes directly from our end of semester CELT kind of feedback, what are they called, surveys that we get. We've had a student who says that the course was clearly structured and organization of online content was great. The resources available were exceptional, both in lecture and labs. Those are two separate students. A different one stating that LT was very well used, and a different one also that the use of LT made it easy to follow along in, and we had amazing practical content, etc. So there's been a lot of really even just anecdotal feedback from students saying that they love that it's structured this way. They find it really nice to follow along the textbook that we give them online, that we've kind of made that's a week by week, you know, thing that they have to do. And then the integration of the LT direct links into that so they can follow directly into LT has been quite seamless and quite enjoyable by the students. So with that, I think that's all I've got today, but I'm very happy to stick around and answer any questions if people have anything specifically. Or Deepika, please jump on if you have any more comments that you would like to share with everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole, for that wonderful presentation. I'll let you take a breather for a minute, and your audience, this is the time to send your questions in through the Q&A toolbar at the bottom. And at this point, I would also like to know from the audience as to how we at AD Instruments can help you in your journey with LT. So I'm just launching a quick poll here as to if you would like to talk to an ADI representative or explore a free pilot trial. So let us know by answering the poll out here. And again, this is the time for you to also send any questions you have for Nicole. I'll just give some time to let the audience take the poll in first, and then we have some questions coming in. All right, so I'll keep the poll on, and then we do have a few questions, Nicole. I'll start with the first one. So this asks, if you are not updating the content every year, are you worried about students taking screen capture and passing it on to the next students?
Yes, great question. So we don't necessarily update the practical activity stuff every year, but we always update our exams and our final exam questions. So I don't think, we're not necessarily worried about them taking screenshots of the practical activities. The students know that it's on them to actually complete the work and to get the most out of the course. They will be there completing the work, and we emphasize that. But yes, we absolutely update the exams and the practical exam and the final exam. I hope that answers the question.
Sure, thank you. The next one is, do you run the prac in a wet lab? So if so, how do you use it in the wet lab?
Yes, great question. So our medical science lab is not considered a wet lab, or they're allowed to have their laptops in there. They do have a wet lab component where they go and see the cadavers as well, and they don't bring their laptops in there. So they are required to kind of look through the activities ahead of time for the wet lab, for the cadaver lab. We demonstrate, we have, different activities within the wet lab so they know what they're doing. And then they'll have some summary activities that they complete after the prac. But yes, essentially they're not taking their computer to do the activities when they're next to the cadavers or anything like that. So that's also a great question I didn't clarify.
So there's another question about the LT itself, if it's separate for teacher and student. I'll start off with the answer, and then if you have anything to add, Nicole, you can add it in. So yes, but the teacher or the instructor has complete command on LT, and the students only see what the instructor would like them to. So there is a publish option. Only once the lesson is published, the students can see it. And if there's any comments from you as to how it works in your environment, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much the same for us. I'm trying to think if we do anything additional, but no, not that I can think of. That's exactly how it works for us too.
Sure. And the next one, so there is a lot of interest, definitely. Do you run the exam on the models and pro sections? If so, how do you integrate the LT in these exams?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we actually don't run exams on the models and pro sections at this stage. And I think I came in just after COVID, and I think this was a change that kind of was spawned on from the COVID pandemic. And, I think for our undergraduates anyways, I think we're quite happy for them to have the experience in the cadaver labs and in the medical science labs, working through the models and all of that. And then they're synthesizing and applying their knowledge in the final exam and the practical exams that we give them. So we're not running them, and we're not integrating that section of LT into our course.
So one more. What would you expect the largest number of students you could teach through the LT practical sessions?
That's a great question. I think it depends on how you set up your practical class. Our class is quite small. We would only have, in a given section, we probably have 30 students, and they're working in groups of 5 to 6. But because the LT system, we set out very specific instructions for what the activities are and how they have to go through them. We have activities, on the table, all the things that they need next to them to work through. So as long as you're comfortable with having your instructions there very specifically and your students are comfortable to go through them, I think that using the LT platform could, work for up to 100 students in a class, even more, depending on how you're grouping them and things like that. I don't see really that there's a limitation as long as you give them the instruction that's required and someone's there to help them through things if they have questions. I suppose that's probably my answer.
Thanks, Nicole. So if anyone else has any questions, do send them through. I have a question I just wanted to add upon. So you said you also run your exams and tests through LT. So there is no proctoring there. So how are you making sure that there's no cheating involved?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's specifically the reason that we have to run them in person. So when we do them, we have to split the class into 2. So we only have, part of the class in at a given time. And we have demonstrators, or there are medical students who are walking around constantly making sure that they're not clicking on different tabs to open and answer the questions. The multiple choice questions specifically, what's it called? The practical exams that we give, where they're only 15 minutes long and they have to answer the multiple choice. We deliberately set it up that way so that they have to be quite quick in the way that they're responding to those questions. And they don't really have time to access anything. But again, we're monitoring them. We have students walking around just like as if it were a on paper test. It's run face to face for that reason.
Sure. Thank you. And what has your experience been authoring everything from the scratch?
Sorry, what has it been?
Authoring everything, the lessons
authoring.
from, yeah.
It's taken time. I guess the biggest time at this stage really is redoing our practical and our final exam for the end for each section and for the end of the course. But that would probably happen whether or not we're using LT. Everything else, as I mentioned, is now on there. All of our pre-prac activities, our practical activities, and our quizzes every week, they're not being graded on that or assessed on those items. That's there purely for their learning and keeping up with the course, and the students are well aware of that. So that's all there now, and we change it. We obviously modify it from time to time, but primarily that's the structure of the course, and that doesn't take off a big portion of our time anymore. And then it's just a matter of, the real-time stress is changing the exams as we need to throughout the course. But I wasn't involved in creating all of these lessons from scratch. There was quite a bit of it already before I joined the team here. So I can't comment on that full production of everything, if that makes sense. Yeah.
All right. So thank you very much, Nicole, for your time today. I think that's all. We have answered all the questions for today. So this was a really intriguing presentation, first of all, and I hope the audience learned something as well today. So just to the audience out there, if you have any questions for us, either from sales or support, you can reach out to Parimal or me for sales or support respectively. And that's it for today. Thank you everyone for your time.